Let's talk about one of the biggest questions in global finance. You've probably heard the story a million times. China holds a ton of US debt, and they've got this giant financial weapon pointed right at the heart of the American economy. But what if that's not the real story? We're going to break down why China buys so much US debt and, maybe more importantly, why they literally can't stop. You see stuff like this all over the internet, right? People are genuinely worried. The fear is that if China ever gets truly angry with the US, they could just dump all their bonds at once. The thinking is that this would send interest rates through the roof and maybe even spark a full-blown financial crisis. It's a really scary thought, and on the surface, it kind of makes sense. But here's the twist. What if that's completely wrong? What if this so-called ultimate financial weapon isn't a weapon at all? What if it's actually more like a boomerang? Something that would fly right back and do way more damage to the person who threw it. Well, that's the idea we're going to put to the test today.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's get one major fact straight. And honestly, this one might surprise you. It really changes the whole conversation.
So get this. The biggest foreign owner of US debt isn't actually China. It's Japan. Yeah, that's right. While China's holding is absolutely massive, Japan holds over $1 trillion worth. So this immediately reframes the whole issue. The media might obsess over China's slice of the pie, but they aren't even the #1 foreign lender. All right, so that brings us to the next logical question, right? If they're not even in the top spot, why are they holding hundreds of billions of dollars in US bonds at all? Is it some grand strategic plan to get leverage over the US, or is there something else going on that's forcing their hand? Well, the answer lies in this really powerful economic cycle that some economists call the dollar trap. It's this self-reinforcing loop, and it's basically the beating heart of the entire US-China financial relationship. Here's how it works. It all starts when American consumers buy stuff from China. Phones, TVs, clothes. A massive flood of US dollars goes pouring into China. Now, those Chinese companies need to pay their workers in their own currency, the yuan. But here's the catch. If they all rush to sell those dollars for yuan, the value of the yuan would skyrocket. And if that happened, Chinese goods would suddenly become way too expensive for Americans to buy. So to stop that from happening, China's central bank steps in. It prints up a bunch of yuan and uses it to buy all those extra US dollars from the exporters. This leaves the central bank with this gigantic pile of US dollars that they have to put somewhere. And what's the safest, most stable place on earth to park that kind of cash? You guessed it, US Treasury bonds. So here's the crucial point. China isn't buying all this US debt as some kind of favor or as a threat. It's a structural necessity. It's baked into their entire economic model. They are, for all intents and purposes, trapped. They're forced to lend money back to their biggest customer just so that customer can keep buying their stuff. Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. What if they just decided, you know what, we're done with this trap? What if they tried to use their holdings as a weapon anyway? Consequences be damned. Let's run a simulation of that so-called nuclear option. If China suddenly flooded the market with all of its US bonds, the US Federal Reserve has a very simple and powerful countermove. It can just create new money and buy every single bond China sells. The US market might get a little shaky, sure, but it wouldn't collapse. But for China, the outcome would be absolutely catastrophic. The act of selling would crash the price of all their remaining US assets, wiping out an immense amount of their wealth. And at the exact same time, the yuan would strengthen dramatically, making Chinese exports unaffordable overnight and triggering mass unemployment. It is quite literally a textbook case of financial mutually assured destruction. And you know what? This isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. We don't actually have to guess what would happen, because we've already seen a real-world test of this theory. Let's go back to 2015. After a pretty small devaluation of its currency, panic erupted in China. It triggered something called capital flight. Basically, wealthy people and companies started rushing to get their money out of the country. To stop the yuan from totally collapsing, the Chinese government was forced to do the exact opposite of the debt weapon scenario. They had to sell off massive chunks of their US dollar reserves just to buy their own currency and keep it stable. And the numbers are staggering. Over that period, they burned through roughly $1 trillion of their foreign reserves. And the impact on the US economy? Pretty much nothing. The US bond market just absorbed it all without much trouble. This whole crisis proved that China's reserves aren't a weapon of aggression. They're a shield for self-defense. So if China is caught in this trap, it only makes sense that they'd be looking for a way out, right? I mean, are they trying to find an escape hatch from their dependency on the US dollar? This is the multi-trillion-dollar question. And for the last few years, one potential answer has been getting a lot of attention. And it's something very shiny: gold. Central banks all over the world, especially after they saw Russia's dollar reserves get frozen by sanctions, have been on a historic gold buying spree. They see it as a way to diversify away from the dollar, to protect themselves from geopolitical risks, and to hold a neutral asset in a world that feels like it's fracturing. And China has been a huge buyer. But here's the big problem. While buying gold is definitely a smart diversification strategy, is it a true replacement for the US dollar? Can it really be the key that finally unlocks the trap? The simple answer is no. For all of its long history, the global gold market is just way too small. It simply cannot absorb the sheer volume of money that countries like China need to invest every single day. There's no other financial market on the planet that has the depth and the liquidity, that's the ability to buy or sell massive amounts quickly without crashing the price, like the market for US Treasuries. So, for now at least, the trap holds.
So, after all this, how should we really think about this incredibly complex relationship? It's time to reframe the entire issue.
This quote just nails it. The money is in a constant loop. American money goes to China to buy goods, and that very same money comes right back to the US to buy government bonds. It's a closed circuit. So the main thing to take away here is that thinking about this as a simple relationship where a powerful creditor is threatening a weak debtor is just completely wrong. It misses the whole picture. It's much more like a really messy, complicated, and deeply codependent marriage. Neither side can really afford to get a divorce without causing immense damage to themselves. They're locked together for better or for worse. And that leaves us with the real question we should be asking. The danger isn't that China is going to voluntarily use this so-called debt weapon. We've seen why that's a total dud. The real danger is what happens if this fragile, unbalanced system breaks down on its own. What happens if this financial marriage ends not by choice, but because the foundation itself just crumbles? Now that is the scenario that should be keeping economists up at night.